event is about sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, sharing understanding, helping to break some of the barriers and taboos around ethnicity and how it works within the profession of psychology and how it relates to mental health.
It's about people coming together to talk about racism, to talk about how we could be more culturally sensitive in mental health services, how we can support people when racism happens, whether it's staff or happening to people using the service, or they're coming with traumas related to their experiences of being treated badly, being treated differently, being treated discriminatorily.
Thinking about the racial inequalities around us, but also focusing on sort of celebrating contributions that come from diverse communities, sort of trying to create connections between diverse communities and mental health practitioners, and trying to also make people feel safe having these conversations. I think that's a big part of it, and getting people to be a bit more comfortable with that. And I guess that comes into what I'd like to achieve today, that these conversations don't go away but are taken places, and that people are able to have them and not, maybe they always will have that fear, but not have that fear as much as they currently do.
It's really trying to open it up, because in mental health services there are these inequalities, things like if you're of colour you're less likely to get talking therapy, you're more likely to get drugs, more likely to get higher doses of drugs if you're black, for example, and more restrictive practices are things like people being forced to take medication, or being locked up in a room in isolation. It's called seclusion. It's not so secluded, it's not a nice thing.
I think it's important to have these conversations, because the way it is at the moment, it's not enough, it's not supporting people enough, it's not making those changes. And so I think having these conversations and speaking with people can learn from each other and what to do next, how to change things.
The conference that we have been delivering today is focusing on different ways in which we can address racial inequalities in mental health. One of the reasons we think this is important is because, firstly, there's not many events like this, and secondly, I think society in general is quite ignorant in addressing racism. If it wasn't for a space like this, I don't know many places these conversations could happen in a safe, contained way.
We're tackling a big issue. We're not tackling an issue which can be dealt with in our own spheres. We're not tackling an issue that exists within one service, one profession, one way of thinking. We can only tackle this issue as a society. So by having those shared understandings and shared learning, that's how we can think about dealing with some of these big issues.
So we've got a workshop looking at our own awareness of privilege and discrimination and racism. We've got a workshop on Islamic approaches to psychology and how that's different and how we can learn from that. We've got a workshop on working with racialized trauma and how to understand that. We've got something on power and thinking about how that we're living in this very hierarchical society, and power affects how we relate to each other, and how can we treat each other as equals within that system, and start to think about creatively resisting that system.
It's not good enough to sit on the fence. But as society as a whole, everyone has a duty to stand up against racism. Everyone has a duty to stand up against oppression.